Imagine walking toward a place that shines with luxury, marble floors, gold signs, and elegant people everywhere. Now imagine being stopped at the gate, not because you did something wrong, but simply because you don't look rich enough. That's exactly what happened to an old man one afternoon. The guard shouted, people stared, and the world moved on, as if kindness had become invisible. But in that silence, a small voice rose, the voice of a little girl who refused to let unfairness win. She didn't see a poor man. She saw a human being. And that single act of compassion changed everything. Because the man she defended wasn't just anyone. He was the millionaire who owned the very place where he was insulted. This story isn't just about money or pride. It's about who we are when no one is watching. It's about remembering that the way we treat others defines what kind of person we truly are. If you've ever been judged by how you look, by your clothes, or by what people think you have, this story is for you. Watch carefully, feel deeply, and if it touches your heart, share it. Leave a comment saying, kindness still exists, because maybe, just maybe, your words can remind someone to look at people differently and help make this world a little more human again. Subscribe for more stories like this, stories that remind us that empathy is the real wealth. The shouting at the gate. The afternoon sun burned over the large iron gates of a luxurious hotel. Cars passed by, and a line of guests entered with confidence. Near the gate stood an old man in simple clothes, faded jeans, dusty shoes, and a wrinkled shirt. His face was calm, almost too calm for someone who seemed out of place in front of so much luxury. He was holding a small brown bag, his eyes looking up at the golden sign of the building. Before he could take another step, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Hey, you can't stand here," shouted the guard, walking toward him with a hand on his belt. The old man turned slowly, still quiet. His silence made the guard even angrier. "Didn't you hear me? This place is not for beggars. Move." The guard pushed the man's shoulder, and the small bag fell to the ground. A sound of glass broke. It was a bottle of water and a sandwich inside a plastic box. People walking by stopped for a second, then continued, pretending not to see. The man bent down to collect his things, but his hands trembled slightly. He wasn't angry. He was just disappointed. A small voice suddenly interrupted the moment. It came from behind the gate. A little girl, around 7 years old, wearing a school uniform, was standing near a flower pot. She had seen everything. "Why are you shouting at him?" she said softly, but firmly. The guard turned, surprised. "Miss, go inside. This man is not supposed to be here." "He didn't do anything wrong," she replied. Her small hand reached into her backpack, and she pulled out a small chocolate bar. "Here, sir. You can have it." The old man looked at her, his eyes suddenly shining with warmth. The guard looked nervous. The little girl smiled and said, "My dad always says, kindness is never wasted." The man smiled weakly, took the chocolate, and whispered, "Thank you, little one. One day, I hope I can return your kindness." She giggled. "You already did," by smiling. Then she ran back inside as her nanny called her name. The guard, now uncomfortable, muttered, "Just go before my boss sees you." The man nodded and walked away quietly, but his eyes, behind the tired look, were watching everything. He noticed the expensive cars, the arrogant faces, and the way the workers looked down, as if afraid of making mistakes. When he reached the corner, he stopped, took out a small phone, and made a call. "Yes," he said calmly, "they don't recognize me yet. Keep everything as planned. Tomorrow morning, I'll come again, differently." He ended the call and looked back one last time at the hotel. The same guard was laughing with another worker, pointing at the spot where he had stood. The old man smiled, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was a quiet, mysterious smile of someone who knew the truth. The return and the revelation. The next morning came with a quiet breeze. The same hotel that had once looked so majestic now seemed ordinary under the soft morning light. A guard from the previous day stood at the gate again, his eyes half open as he sipped his tea. A black car stopped in front of the gate, shiny, silent, and clearly expensive. Two men in suits stepped out, followed by another, the same old man, but not looking old anymore. His hair was clean, his clothes were a perfect fit, and the watch on his wrist could easily buy the guard's yearly salary. The guard froze. His cup slipped from his hand, spilling tea all over the ground. He tried to stand straight, but his voice cracked. Sir ... I didn't recognize you yesterday ... The man smiled, calm and firm. That's all right, he said. It wasn't a test. It was a mirror. The guard didn't understand. The man continued, when we look at someone, we see our own reflection of who we are. Yesterday, you saw a beggar. Today, you see a millionaire. But I am the same person. You changed, not me. The hotel manager ran to the entrance, breathing heavily. Sir, Mr. Hayes, we had no idea you would come so soon. Everything is ready for your inspection. Please, come inside. The name hit everyone around like thunder. Mr. Arthur Hayes, the man who owned the entire hotel chain. Arthur turned slightly toward the guard. Tell me, what did you see in me yesterday? The guard's face turned pale. I saw a man who didn't belong here. I was wrong. I'm sorry, sir. Don't be sorry to me, Arthur said quietly. Be sorry to yourself for thinking that money decides who belongs. The air around them went silent. The workers stopped what they were doing, some whispering to each other. Arthur walked slowly through the same gate where he had been pushed away the day before. Every step was heavy with meaning. Inside, the same little girl from yesterday was sitting in the lobby with her nanny. She looked up and gasped. It's you, the man from yesterday, she said, running toward him with a bright smile. Arthur knelt down. And you are the brave one who stood up for me? What's your name? Sophie, she replied proudly. Sophie, he said, smiling. Yesterday, you gave me something worth more than gold, your kindness. And today, I want to give something back. He looked at her nanny, and then at the hotel staff. From this day, I want this hotel to have a new rule. Anyone who enters, no matter how they look, must be treated with respect. If not, the staff will answer directly to me. The manager nodded nervously. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Arthur stood and looked at the guard again. You will keep your job, he said to everyone's surprise. But every morning, before you shout at someone, I want you to remember this little girl's face. She has more wisdom in her heart than most adults I've met. Sophie grinned. Does that mean I helped you, sir? Arthur laughed softly. More than you can imagine. You reminded me why I built this hotel, not for the rich, but for everyone who needs a safe place to rest, somewhere that reminds them that kindness still exists. Later that day, Arthur sat by the window of his suite. The same view, but everything felt different now. He thought of his own childhood, growing up poor, hungry, invisible. That's why he had built an empire, to prove something. But today, he realized he no longer needed to prove anything. He smiled, watching Sophie playing in the garden below. Sometimes, the richest moments in life come from the smallest acts of kindness. Outside, the guard stood at his post again. But now, when a tired man with dusty shoes approached the gate, he didn't shout. Instead, he said, Good morning, sir. Can I help you with anything? A man nodded and smiled, and for the first time, the guard smiled back. Arthur whispered to himself, watching from above, "Maybe I was never pretending to be broke. Maybe I was just waiting to see who was truly rich." And with that, he closed his eyes, feeling peace, not the peace that comes from wealth, but from understanding what truly matters.